then it also shows me for the last 37 years, they have served with distinction. Remember, they started when we were only 12 million Ugandans. We are now about 40. Holding the nation for 37 years together is not a mean achievement. It is something big. When I looked at ACODE, that is also involved. It is a global think tank with repute. It has now won an award. It's actually ranked 15 out of 90. So when I look at the Ugandans and their passion about agriculture, because that's where we should be, I was like, I think this is where we need to be. We need to discuss about all these, because that's where our focus as a country and our energies and our potential are. No wonder, almost 100 years ago, a British Prime Minister came to Uganda and said, this was the Pearl of Africa. So we can keep it that way and improve on it. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the Executive Director of ACODE, Dr. Arthur Bainomujisha, to come and give the welcoming remarks. Dr. Bainomujisha, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. Honorable Christopher Chiwazanga, the Minister of State for Agriculture, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, if you are in the audience, General Salim Sare Akandwanaho, Senior Presidential Advisor on Defense and Security, General Muhozi, David Muhozi, Chief of Defence Forces, Brigadier General Aaron Novat from Galilee Institute, Ms. Delphine Mujisha, a Program Director at CARE, our partners, NBS, Foundation for Youth Mentorship, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is my honor to warmly welcome all of us to this symposium, whose title is Climate Change, Food Security, and National Stability in East Africa. So the discussions today will underpin the nexus between food security, climate change, and their relevance to national stability across East Africa. I want to salute UPDF leadership for accepting to partner with the civil society. And the framework of this symposium is part of the civil-military relations to bring the security forces, especially UPDF, to work in partnership with the civilian population for peace and development of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, for some of you who don't know ACODE, we are a public policy. We are a public policy research and advocacy think tank. We are based here, but we work in Eastern Africa, including the Horn. We are founded in 1999. We are non-partisan, but we are political in the sense that we work on political issues to improve governance, democratic governance, peace in East Africa. And our work is largely informed by evidence-based research that is geared towards contributing to the socio-economic and political transformation of our country, our countries. I just wanted to share with you a small quotation, and it reads, in comparative terms, Africa is the only region in the world where the average food production has been declining over the last 40 years, putting large segments of the population at risk of food insecurity and malnutrition. Food Agriculture Organization reports that for the continent as a whole, annual per capita production of cereals has fluctuated between 140 kilograms to 170 kilograms during the 1990s, far below the global average of 358 kilograms. Production growth in cereals for sub-Saharan Africa over the past 30 years was around 2.5% per annum, and is expected to stay roughly at this level for the next 30 years. This quotation underpins how food insecure the continent is, yet very much endowed. I will not go to define the key concepts here. climate change, food security, because we have an expert who will talk about it, Brigadier General Alon. So I will skip that one. But underpin the fact that Uganda is an agro-based economy. Over 80% of our population are dependent on agriculture for employment and for their livelihoods. And therefore, if climate change undermines our ability to produce food in sufficient quantities, then it is important that today we interrogate this subject and come up with proposals that could mitigate against climate change, but also create adaptation. Because we must adapt. We should never perish, but adapt to these changes. But climate change is real all over the planet. Even America, which had pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and they were hit by 2 hurricanes, which also flattered, I think, the Gulf Coast of President Trump. Trump has now accepted. They are considering of rejoining the agreement because climate change is real and it manifests in a number of ways, including having pests that are very difficult to eradicate, diseases, pre-harvest food destruction, post-harvest losses, and unfavorable conditions of crops. So climate change is bad. I thought that this was projected all this time. I wanted to share with you quickly the impact of climate change, and basically around River Rizi, which is a river in western Uganda that serves 11 districts, which has been decimated, putting the vision or the dream of Mbarara being a city very far, because it's a city that now will have no water, and they are proposing of getting water from Kajera to Mbarara. And Kajera water is also really contaminated. So we will not be able to see that. But I just also wanted to answer a small question. Why foster civil-military relations in combating climate change and ensuring food security? The Uganda Peoples Defence Forces Act 205 provides for a partnership between the army and civil society, indeed the civilian population. Actually, part 2 of the Act 205 provides for the functions of UPDF as follows. 1, to cooperate with civilian authority in emergency situations, in cases of natural disaster, to foster harmony and understanding between defense forces and civilians, to engage in productive activities of the development of Uganda. This is supported also by the White Paper on Defense and Transformation of June 2004, which categorizes environmental stress and natural resources constraints as a core threat to Uganda's security. So it is very imperative that our security forces, working with the civilian population, engage the issues of security of another kind. Because the challenges of the 21st century are not likely to be the traditional security threats that the UPDF and other armies are going to be called upon to address. The most critical threats are non-military threats, including epidemics like Ebola. In the case of Sierra Leone, the army was called in to quarantine people. They had never been trained to quarantine people, to stop the movement, because by people moving, they would spread Ebola. So live ammunition had to be used if the country was to be saved. So what that means is that it is important that the security forces and in partnership with the academia, civil society, engage together to understand the changing security threats and adapt or respond appropriately. So that is why I want to thank the leadership of UPDF through you, General Mhoz, for accepting to work with us. This is the 3rd symposium where we discuss topical issues that are of security in nature, but also involve the citizens. On a special note, as I conclude, I want to thank CARE International in Uganda, represented by the program director, Mr. Eliabna Tulinda, Foundation for Youth Mentorship, NBS, who contributed resources with ACODE to organize this very important meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for coming, and God bless you.
Give Mr. Dr. Bainomjish another round of applause. When he's talking about issues of environment, they are real. Recently, I attended another symposium in Mbarara about the River Ruizi catchment area. And I think he was trying to show you the pictures of River Ruizi. It occurred to me that Mbarara is one of the largest cities in western Uganda, which is developing. For those who know Mbarara, River Ruizi has now become just a trickle. You can imagine, the city is growing. And now they now want to get water from as far as Kagera on the Uganda-Tanzanian border. And where is River Ruizi coming from? From the mountains of Uhweju. Even there, it is just a trickle. I think I've realized the environment can always survive without us. But we, the people, we cannot survive without the environment. So we have to think hard. We have to adapt or we die. Because the environment will always be there. Unless we keep it, then we may not stay well. So I think it is important that we take a lot of keen interest in it. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite from Foundation for Youth Mentorship, Eliab Naturinda, to come and speak to us. Eliab.
Thank you very much, Ndugu Kamara. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eliab Naturinda. I have not prepared a speech, but I want to begin by the words of Frantz Fanon. One said, every generation must out of its relative obscurity set its own mission. It can either fulfill it or betray it. I want to thank the UPDF for having set a mission to make sure that it cooperates with the civilians like us and the young people and the people of Uganda to make sure that peace prevails, and that is why we're having these symposiums. I thank you very much. Point number 2 is to thank the partners. This idea was hatched in 2016, and we said as Foundation for Youth Mentorship, we don't have the resources, we may have the ideas, but we have our good partners who can mentor us. So that is how we started in this very hall. Dr. Arthur supported us, and from that time, I can confidently assure you that this is the 3rd Liberation Symposium we are having. The last point is that as young people, if you look at the theme of today, food security, and of course, it's upon us to get involved in agriculture, because agriculture is the backbone of this country. When I was back then studying law at Uganda Christian University, I would say that there is no way a lawyer can get involved in agriculture. But it's now about 10 years down the road, but I find myself deep in the hills of Uganda in Mubende, practicing agriculture. And I can confidently tell you the farmers are doing very well. I want to call upon the professionals, enjoy agriculture, participate in agriculture, because it is upon us that the professionals and the young people who are it's no longer about the future leaders of this country. We are now in charge, with support of our elders, because our elders must support us in order to make sure that the peace the General Saleh fought when he was 16 years to join the army, that peace prevails and the young people maintains it. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to appeal to us that as young people, we participate in agriculture, because when you participate in it, the region of East Africa is the market. If you combine now, South Sudan has joined and we have enough food, there is no way we can really suffer as a region. Because if we don't have food, that means security-wise, we are surely doing bad. And it is on that note that I thank you very much for coming. The young people from different universities, they are here. And of course, our international community and our brothers and sisters from Eritrea and the Somali Republic. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Eliab. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Eliab. And when you talk about environment, I'll be using examples here and there as invite different speakers to come and speak to us. Honorable Minister, you know you come from the Rwenzori area. I'm sure you have the terrain intelligence of the Rwenzori. There's a river called Nyamwamba. Almost every May, it would come and claim lives around Kasese. But also there's a small river. I come from Kenjoju. It is called Rwebijoka. I used to go and swim there. It has now disappeared in my lifetime. It's no longer there. So I'm imagining, how is it going to be like in the next 30 or 20 years? Unless we try to gather our natural given potential, the Pearl of Africa may not be the Pearl of Africa anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite from the Country Director, Care International, Ms. Delphine Penalt, to speak to us. Delphine.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm called Delphine Tumsime Mujisha. I'm not Delphine Pinot, but I happen to share the same name with my boss. My boss is a French lady called Delphine Pinot. And I work with Care International. Maybe a bit of background on what Care International is. Care International is one of the INGOs, international non-government organizations in Uganda, established in Uganda in 1969, so it has been here for a while. And we do a lot of work in natural resources governance. We also do work on climate smart agriculture. That is why we are here and working in partnership with ACODE. We also do a lot of work on gender-based violence. And when you hear me talking about women's inclusion here, it's not because I'm a woman, but it is because of the realities that we all know. So in my opening remarks, I will just simply very quickly say that I think we are facing a huge challenge as a nation that we are not well prepared for. But we are all coming here for a reason. There are some statistics that we would like to share with you very, very quickly. I know that many of us have done studies and we know what is going on. We know we are facing a challenge in the agriculture sector. Our agriculture sector, in terms of total GDP, is declining consistently. Studies are showing us that from 1990s, we've declined to about 23% from 25%. And this change, part of it is attributable to climate change, land degradation, and decline in agricultural productivity. We all know that the biggest percentage of our population lives in the rural areas and depends heavily on agriculture. So there are some facts that we really need to look at. We know that also poverty has been decreasing, but as it has been decreasing, there are some realities we need to bear in mind. And again, I will go back to the status of women here, that even if we are looking at the poverty decreasing, but there are issues that we need to look at from a gender perspective. 23% of poor women still suffer from moderate to severe malnutrition. And these are realities we need to ask ourselves. If we are producing more, how come that the nutrition levels are going up? There are also other facts we need to look at. Our land is highly degraded, and most of our agriculture, much of it is rain-fed. There are a number of things that I won't go through, but we can always share this presentation with you because of time. What I want to quickly run to is some of the reports that are coming through that we are being labeled as a nation that's most vulnerable and least prepared in terms of how we are dealing with climate change and how we need to move into building that resilience. The other issue that I want to bring to our attention, which we all know, as much as our agriculture sector is largely dependent on the labor force from women, yet we know that in terms of benefit sharing, they get the least. But also in terms of skilled, they are the least skilled. So we need to ask ourselves the question that if we are dealing with women, who are the biggest producers in a sector that is holding the economy, how come they are the least skilled, and how come they are the most affected in many ways and the least who are sharing in terms of benefits? How do we expect then to grow this sector? So the constraints that we will mentioned here are several. I want to very quickly run to what we are doing about it as CARE. And I believe that many of us can learn from that. First of all, as CARE, we believe that we need to build people's capacity to absorb and adapt to all these climate shocks. They are inevitable now where we are. We know that global warming is not only a Ugandan or African problem, it is a global issue. But I think we can do something. And we believe that by addressing the underlying causes of poverty and giving the people at household level tangible and visible skills on how to adapt to these shocks, they will be in a better position to be able to confront them. So what are we doing in CARE? For us in CARE, we map out the shocks, the stresses, the drivers around those stresses and the shocks. We look at how to manage those risks. We work on a household basis. We work with families. We work with farmer field schools, where I know that our colleagues from the UPDF are doing a great job. Maybe just a tip for the UPDF, we have got feedback from those women who you are supporting in terms of information access and skills building, that they wish you could have many more women who are the ones communicating to them, because sometimes at the end of the day, it is increasing gender-based violence at household level. So if we may have more extension workers who are women, then the women-to-women communication might reduce that risk for them at household level. The other thing that we are doing is a number of approaches that we are adopting and we have tested and tried. I will not go through all these. I'll just quickly run to another slide where I will ask those of you who may be interested to actually take down that, that website. It's the slide before. And you can get more resources there that I believe can help us and help all of us who are involved in climate change resilience. For us going forward, what are we doing? We are beginning a program right now with ACODE on building community resilience. And we are going to work in West Nile, in Northeast, in the West and Mid-North. And one of the things that we are trying to do at that point is to make sure that whatever agricultural approaches we are coming with are gender responsive. Because we are realizing that there is need for us to tailor those specific interventions, not only in a generic sense, but actually to go down and understand the differences in which women and men communicate, learn, get informed, and also are able to utilize these. So we are looking at gender relations in that regard and building that resilience in terms of adopting climate-smart agriculture skills. We are also moving into looking at nutrition-sensitive agriculture, not just production for the sake of production. How does that lead to enabling us to have a strong force? If we don't have healthy people who are producing, then we will not have consistent production. We need to look at those who are behind the production. How healthy are they? What is the disease prevalence? How often are they in hospital? Because if they are more sick than healthy, then we won't be able to get much out of it. The other area we are looking at is promoting sustainable agriculture systems that will look at addressing the climate, social, and environmental impact. And especially working with farmer field schools and climate field schools. I think this is where we need to encourage most of the farmers to actually move. And I think most of us know that it is not uncommon to go to a community. You find somebody with a garden that has, hybrid maize, it is growing very well, but the neighbor next to them is still using indigenous seed, which is not even producing 2 sacks of maize. So you ask yourself, what is the problem? Why can't these two farmers communicate, learn from one another? So I think we need to find ways of making sure that they come in a kind of farmer field school where they learn more. We're also looking at promoting proper and climate smart value chains and market systems. Production without market will make many young people run out of agriculture. And one of the other things we're also trying to do is how can we get the young people to embrace agriculture and really enjoy working in this sector. Because if young people don't see benefits out of it, they will not go there. They will all run to the city. And last but not least is improving and sustaining our agro-meteorological advisor and extension services. There's a lot of information that is coming through the meteorological station, but how user-friendly is it? We've discovered that even some of the local government officials have a hard time interpreting this information. So one of the things that we are trying to do is to work with the production offices within the local government offices, linking them to the meteorological station so that this information can be simplified and explained in a simple way. As I conclude and welcome all of you for coming to be with us, let me just raise an issue. that as we are working around fighting poverty, let's remember the impact the South Sudanese influx is causing in West Nile. As we speak right now, a district like Zombo has more South Sudanese than the Ugandan natives there. And this has an impact. The other impact we are seeing on the ground is the degradation of the natural resources at the moment. There is a lot of felling down of trees, which they need for fuel. There is no way they will eat food unless they are actually cutting down trees. So we need to keep our eye on this. We need the extension services to move not only in the stable communities, but to also be extended to the emergency and humanitarian areas. We know that there is also the Congolese influx coming right now. We are now beginning to do assessments there to understand what the impact is. As CARE, we don't only do work only in the peaceful environment, but we also go to the humanitarian and emergency environment and still carry the same message there. I wish you all the best as we go through this symposium, and I hope it will be informative and useful for all of us. Thank you for coming.
Give Madam Tumusime Mujisha another round of applause. And my apologies for having given you a name that is not yours, Madam Tumusime. And let me just, before I invite the next speaker, maybe touch on a few things. You talked about environment degradation because of the numbers of the Sudanese refugees coming in. But that's not all. I'm pretty sure that majority of us who have had breakfast or lunch, or maybe we're going to have dinner, that dinner will be prepared either using biofuel or charcoal. And that's how it was yesterday, and the other day, and the other day. And perhaps that's how it will be tomorrow. That for us to eat and survive, a tree must be cut down. Think about it. Is it sustainable? I know we're building dams, but today we have a surplus capacity of about 100 megawatts. And very soon, if we're lucky, we're going to have 500 megawatts. It's a good thing. But are we going to use it to cook? So if we are going to decimate our forest cover so that we can eat, we are in a self-destruction mode. Something must be done. The person I'm going to invite to speak is, of course, the Chief of Defence Forces. As a journalist, I was able to get an opportunity to work alongside them as an embedded journalist following them and see what the UPDF does. I was there in Bunia when you were fighting against Tomalu Bang and his forces. I was there in Wikwamba when you were fighting against the LRA. I followed you up in 2002 in Imatong Mountains when you were hunting coin, and crossed Kitty River with you and Kitty Valley. I was there in Afogoya and Balad in Somalia recently. I've seen the professionalism but also the bravery of our men and women in uniform. I think give them a round of applause. I can tell you, when I entered Mogadishu, 1 year after they had gone there, I didn't know that they were just holed up in a small place, hemmed in one tiny place. Until when we went back 5 years later, I realized, like, what? You mean we were just in this small place? Those guys, when they are there, you can see what they call Hakuna Michezo. Because you blink, you die. They never blink, because if you blink, you die. So if you can bring the professionalism and bring the discipline and bring the focus into fighting climate change and trying to develop agriculture, we have an institution that still has a pulse, and it's the UPDF. I'm wondering why that pulse is not infectious to infect other institutions. But how I wish it could be infectious. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite General David Muhoozi, Chief of Defence Forces.
The Honorable Minister, State for Agriculture, Honorable Kibanzanga, General Salim Saleh, our elder, co-conveners of this symposium, ACODE, the panelists, general officers present, and thank you for voting with your feet. You've come in big number, which shows the attachment we have to this topic. Ladies, gentlemen, good afternoon. The theme is there: climate change, food security, and national stability in East Africa. and the topic given to me is our role in combating climate change as a non-traditional security threat. But before I delve into the topic, I want maybe to share with you our functions as laid out in the Constitution, and they are on the screen, including preserving and defending the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Uganda, cooperating with the civilian authority in emergency situations and in cases of natural disasters, many of these caused by climate change and environmental degradation. You've heard stories of Bududa, where we had to intervene with other partners to mitigate the consequences of natural disasters. C, fostering harmony and understanding between the defense forces and the civilians. Very, very important platform for engagement, including like this one. And then lastly, engaging in productive activities for the development of Uganda, including agriculture, which is the mainstay of this country. In addition to those functions, there are the duties of the citizens. We, as members of the UPDF, come from the population. And those are the duties and obligations of every citizen, but I'm more inclined to rush to role number J. Number J, which is to create and protect a clean and healthy environment. So this is an added role. As citizens in uniform, we must ensure a clean and healthy environment. My discussion will be more about amplifying the threat of climate change. I may not have time to offer our solutions, but I think maybe if we understand enough the threat we face, then we can craft the right responses together and in time. That said, the UPDF has a duty to defend and protect a geographical entity called Uganda in many aspects, including non-military roles, but all within the legal mandate, as I talked about. We face a spectrum of threats, and these include both traditional and non-traditional, like Dr. Binomcha said. The traditional ones refer to those that may directly threaten the state from within or from without. They may be military or political in nature. However, the threat environment has changed drastically. And we have now a new set of threats that are referred to as non-traditional. Climate change has a high place on this new list of added threats, and it has security implications. The population, as Martha said, naturally tends to grow geometrically, or as we would say now, exponentially. In a finite world, this means that per capita share of the world's goods must steadily decrease. So the question is ours a finite world? A fair defense can be put forward for the view that the world is infinite, or that we do not know that it is not. That is comforting ourselves. But in terms of the practical problems that we must face in the next few generations with the foreseeable technology, it is clear that we will greatly increase human misery if we do not, during the immediate future, assume that the world available to the human population is finite. Space is no escape. This is according to Professor Garrett Hardin. Climate change, like I said, is man-induced, and it's mostly caused by environmental degradation. I will borrow more from Garrett, his theory of the tragedy of the commons, which best illustrates our current situation. And this is an economic theory of a situation within a shared resource system where individual users acting independently according to their own self-interest, behave contrary to the common good of all users by depleting or spoiling that resource through their collective action. This analogy was derived from the commons of England in those days, and these were commonly used tracts of land at that time. To illustrate more about this, you can read from the screen. It means that you can picture, for example, a pasture which is open to all. It is to be expected that each herdsman will try to keep as many cattle as possible on the commons. Such an arrangement may work reasonably satisfactorily for centuries because tribal wars, poaching, and disease keep the numbers of both man and beast well below the carrying capacity of the land. Finally, however, comes the day of reckoning. That is the day the long-desired goal of social stability becomes a reality. At this point, the inherent logic of the commons remorselessly generates tragedy. As a rational being, each herdsman seeks to maximize his gain. Explicitly or implicitly, more or less consciously, he asks, what is the utility to me of adding one more animal to my herd? This utility has one negative and one positive component. The positive component is that is the function of increment of one animal. Since the herdsman receives all the proceeds from the sale of the additional animal, the positive utility is nearly positive 1. The negative component is the function of the additional overgrazing created by one more animal. Since, however, the effect of overgrazing are shared by all the herdsmen, the negative utility for any particular decision-making herdsman is only a fraction of -1. In sum, adding together the component partial utilities, the rational herdsman concludes that the only sensible course for him to pursue is to add another animal to his herd, and another, it's endless. But this is the conclusion reached by each and every rational herdsman in the commons. So there is where our tragedy lies. Each man is locked into a system that compels him to increase his herd without limit in a world that is limited. Ruin, they say, is the destination towards which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest in a society that believes in the freedom of the commons. Freedom in the commons brings ruin to all, end quote. This is the grisly picture we face, and some of the most common activities that affect the environment negatively, before going far in Uganda, include wetland encroachment. Rubiji the other day was threatened. People had to be ejected by force. Mobs came and raided Rubiji. Rubiji feeds Kampala. Deforestation for agricultural purposes and fuel. We talked a lot about wood fuel, but it may be good to offer alternatives because people must eat. This is a reality. And some of this lies on private lands. So how do we do it? Public lands, the easier bit, but how do we handle the destruction of forests on privately held land? Fires, reckless fires, charcoal burning, overgrazing, unplanned agriculture like the ones in the commons, land fragmentation. Silting of major water sources. The story of River Rizi and Nyamwamba have been told. Then reliance on rain-fed agriculture. We have lots of water, but we never harvest water when it rains. The consequences of these are dire, and they include destruction of our fauna, animal life in their varieties, whose habitat, of course, is under threat, reduced rainfall, limited food yields from agriculture and food insecurity, drought, famine, increase in crime as people are forced out of agriculture and strive for other means of livelihood, poverty, social discontent, insecurity, migration, and displacement. The above consequences have got diverse effects, including mass movement of people in search of resources, water, food, pasture, arable land within the individual countries and across borders. A phenomenon that leads to tensions, to conflict, that like the lady from CARE was talking about in Zombo, and competition over limited or scarce resources as a result of climate change and other reasons. Conflicts like these over resources for survival resulting from climate change quite often provide manure for strife and insecurity. Therefore, climate change not only impacts individual persons and communities, but also affects the economic performance and stability of countries, which in turn limits the ability of those countries to provide social services to the people as expected. The UN statistics are there, and the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported that by 2030, mitigation and interventions in response to climate change will be within the region of about $700 billion annually. Huge resources which would otherwise benefit other sectors instead of mitigation, if it could go into prevention. So the choices also we make in terms of expenditure inform the attachment or the understanding of the challenge we face. The UPDF, in exercise of its mandate in coordination with other government agencies, has a number of engagements. I would say not sufficient, but they are there, and these include what we do collectively with other departments like UA, we deploy there, NFA, fisheries, among others. The army had to come in to reinforce, to regenerate the fish in the lakes, which were under threat because of poor fishing methods. And then we also deploy, of course, to guard the forests with the NFA. By implication, we also contribute food security. And in our midst, I'm glad to have Afande Saleh, who leads the Operation Wealth Creation, which has been an operation geared towards income generation, but going through agriculture. The other ventures we think are important that we should associate with reforestation, and we do this with other agencies, but in a dispersed way, if we can make it more comprehensive. We also, like I said, are part of the household wealth creation venture through Operation Wealth Creation. We vouch for establishment of a land bank. This has been our slogan, but we need to act so that we have land for posterity, land for the future, especially in light of the increasing land fragmentation. We advocate for regeneration of degraded areas, wetlands included. We advocate for adherence to strict environmental protection laws and enforcement of these laws through stringent penalties for those who offend these laws. We advocate for review of the education system to cover environmental, the importance of environmental protection at all levels, from primary to tertiary levels. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, climate change can be a catalyst for instability or a threat multiplier, if not addressed in time. We need more of such candid conversations about the nature and magnitude of this threat and the necessary effective collective responses to ensure that we check the impact of climate change. The risks posed by climate change are real, and time is of the essence. We need to act and act together, and now our posterity lies in agriculture as a country and largely even as a region. And that is meaningful agriculture, which depends on how we mitigate the effects of climate change. For the UPDF, this informs forthwith, we shall capture it and entrench it in our SOPs, but we want the country, we want other partners to move in step with us. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Give General Muhoozi another round of applause. And he ended saying that we must act now and act together. We must act and act together. And you can see in his speech, he tackled things with the precision of a general. So I can imagine whoever is in the unit and wherever they are listening, and they are going to act now and act together on the things that we face. Thank you very much. You said maybe we can come with proposals on how we can save our trees. General, I wonder if Winston Churchill was to come again, I don't know what name he would give Uganda. Because then he said we are the Pearl of Africa. Probably he would give us another name. But now the Honorable Minister, whom I'm going to invite to come and speak to us, comes from that part of Uganda. If Churchill had gone there, I don't know what he would have called it. Because it's the Rwenzori. I think it's the crown jewel of the Pearl of Africa. But is it going to continue like this any longer? Unless we do something. So, the Honorable Minister of State for Agriculture, the Honorable Christopher Kibanzanga, who's also a Member of Parliament for Uyendera constituency in the Bundubujo district. Sir, I warmly welcome you to come and speak to us and also open our symposium officially, sir.
Thank you very much, Bwana Kamala, for inviting me to address this important audience. General Salim Saleh, the Senior Advisor on the issues of the security to the President, and the National Coordinator, Operation Wealth Creation, CDF, General Muhoozi, thank you very much for being here. The Executive Director, ACODE, thank you very much for inviting us. The representative of K International, thank you very much for being here. And all of you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm only here for 5 minutes. And yet the topic we are discussing is dear to some of us. Climate change, food security, the national stability in East Africa. Those 3 topics are so related. I would have loved to be with you up to the end so that really I listen to you and probably maybe I take the message home and to the ministry. Unfortunately, I will not be here for long. And this is a Liberation Symposium. Very interesting. Liberation Symposium. General Akandanaho and his colleagues liberated us from dictatorship. And that's why we are free, and that's why we have liberty today. But now we are faced with another enemy. Very dangerous enemy, very tricky, and very difficult to fight. Climate change, which has an effect on food security and the stability of the whole region called the East and Central Africa. And probably maybe the whole of Africa and the whole world.
I'm here to make remarks. And let me make these remarks. The wars of the 19th century, the wars of the 19th century, they were called the world wars. They were caused on how to allocate resources to those countries. How do we allocate resources to ourselves? Everywhere they saw a mountain, they had to share it. The Belgians in Congo, the British in Uganda, the French in Rwanda, trying to share Mount Rwenzori, allocate themselves those resources. And it caused a conflict they called, was it the First World War? Those who have experience in wars. Was it the First World War? Huh? The First World War? Both. The First and the Second World War. It was about to allocate resources to themselves. The next, or the Third World War, is going to be caused on how to share the dwindling scarce resources. That one was to allocate. This one is to share the dwindling world resources. Water is high on the agenda. Oil is the second. And you can see what is in the Middle East. It's nothing but fighting for oil. Now, if water is the first on the agenda, oil is the second on the agenda, men and women are already killing each other in the Middle East. Where are we? Kamara, some of us who come from the water tower of the world, we're about to get our share of the world conflict caused about how do we share, how do we access water. There is a silent conflict over the Nile. Don't pretend about it. Very silent. Over the Nile. It's not silent. The generals are saying it's not silent, it's an open conflict. Over the Nile water. I was in one of the East African countries, which I'm not going to name. I don't know whether I should tell you this story, and yet I'm here for only 5 minutes. I will consume a lot of time. And it may cause more conflict. But all the same, let me say it. I was in one of the East African countries, in their beautiful capital. We were sharing a bottle of wine. Those generals asked me, where do you come from? First of all, who are you? I said, I'm Chwanzanga Christopher, a member of parliament from Uganda, proud of coming from a country which is the source of the longest river in the world. They said, which river is that one? I said, the Nile. They said, who told you that the Nile comes from Uganda? I only avoided a conflict. The generals were about to take me. And they said, there has never been a lake which is a source of a river. It was getting late. They said, let us stand on the balcony of this hotel. River Nile comes from these hills. These hills. You can go there and follow that river. I'm not going to name that river also. That river, it will enter into the the lake and you will see it going out of the lake. Those were generous. Let me borrow the words of FK, but I will put them differently. If man does not put an end to environmental degradation, environmental degradation is going to put an end to mankind. No shortcut. Now Uganda as a country will have a very big role. And some of us who come from Rwenzori, we have the biggest role to play in this. We come from the water tower of the world. All the water that is living in Rwenzori is shared with the rest of the world. That's also a source of a conflict, I think. And this has given us a sense of universal relationship, which should give us a universal sense of responsibility. President Museveni, realizing this in 1993, he declared Rwenzori a national park and therefore a protected area. A protected area. But because the other countries are not so conscious about the environmental issues, distant authorities, they call themselves industrialized world, they are causing a lot of trouble to the mountain. The snow-capped mountain is now a rock-capped mountain. And therefore, what is the future of mankind in the next 20 years? I seem to be threatening you, but this is the truth about climate change, about food security, and the stability of the region. And yet in the next 20 years, the superpowers are those countries that will produce enough food for themselves and enough food for their neighbors. So Uganda gets serious. Although Kamala posed a question, if Churchill came back to Uganda, will he still describe this country as a Pearl of Africa? Yes, Uganda is still a Pearl of Africa. I would share you with another story, but I don't have the time. When you fly from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, you come following the desert, you enter into the Horn of Africa, desert. You are in Turkana. That lake is disappearing. Now the only green country is when you enter where? Uganda. But the vanguard of our democracy, of our human rights, of our security, they made UPDF. As you're in Somalia, that Horn of Africa, please come up with other strategies to fight this desertification that is about to enter Uganda. Let's just design methods on how we can plant trees in the desert. For me, I don't know. How do we plant trees in the desert? No wonder there are so many wars in the Horn of Africa. It's about resources, by the way. as I end, this is another remark I'm making. I'm not going to explain. It is a food for thought. Because I don't have much time with you. I'm being called somewhere else to do the same thing I'm doing here. We are spending much time and resources on what we want as opposed to what we did. And because of this, we have destroyed our habitat. Why? Spending much resources, spending much time on what we want as opposed to what we need. This is terrible. This is terrible. Why should many sit down and manufacture? The other missile is called what? Nuclear something. What is the missile? Nuclear weapon. Why should a man sit in a laboratory manufacturing a nuclear weapon when you can kill another human being using a soft pin? If your problem is people. Why don't you kill them using a soft pin? Why do you make a missile? Anyway, I'm not a diplomat. I'm sorry for that comment. May God bless you. But start producing what you need as opposed to what you want. May God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Christopher Kibanzanga. Give him another round of applause. You can see a minister who is passionate about the environment, also passionate about Uganda. And he comes from a place he is calling the water tower of the world, the Rwenzori. Thank you very much. And I think most of us will agree with him that next major conflict in the world could come because of water. We have seen the Ethiopians are building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and that has caused a little fracas there. I know as a minister, you wouldn't want to tell us where that conversation was when I was being told about the source of the Nile. By the nature of my job, I've been able to move around, and I've seen one place somewhere around Bujumbura, I think, there's a source of the Nile there. Perhaps you didn't know. Before you know it, many people will be claiming the source of the Nile. But let them claim. Let us protect what we have. Before I invite in our next speaker, I was lucky enough to go to his country, the state of Israel. And I was lucky enough also to visit the state of Israel, different cities and different areas. From the north in Haifa, to the Golan Heights, to the Dead Sea, to Lake Tiberias, to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. One day, one of the tour operators I was moving with, I think in Tiberias, I asked, because I could see a hill that is a desert is blossoming. And I asked him, I think he was called Major Ron, a retired army officer. I said, how have you done this? And he said, Patrick, with a little bit of water and a lot of ideas and power from above, the desert is going. So yes, you're looking for solutions. I think since you have people who know how to fight the desert, I could see something called the drip irrigation that was doing wonders. And I could also see wonders in the Golan Heights. By the way, some of these rivers we hear, Jordan River, it's just a trickle, in my view, with all respect, if you compare it with the Nile and the others. But because they have guarded it well, they are telling their story, and image is everything. So when you go looking for the Jordan, you're not looking for the Zambezi. No. It's a small river, but they have guarded it, and it looks as fresh. There's even fish in it. But these gentlemen have taught us that even in the desert, you can have tropical fruits. I used to enjoy them at Mount Sinai Hotel. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite Brigadier General retired Alon Navot to speak to us. Shalom. Shalom.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. honorable minister that just left, distinguished guest, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here. One special thank to Dr. Bainomu Gisha, the head of ACODE, that invited us, Galilee Institute. I want to share with you some of our experience. I've prepared a presentation which I'll run on it because some of the slides you have heard already, and I am not going to make anything new to you. But I want to share some of the Israeli experience with you. So those of you who were not in Israel and didn't experience what just the man just said, he could say stream and not a river, but he was afraid that I was being insulted, so he said a river. In African terms, it's no more than a stream, the Jordan River. But in Israel, it's the biggest river of them all. Take a look at the Middle East. This is Israel over here. If you look at it quite tight, you will see that the word Israel is not written on the land because there is not enough place to put the letters Israel. The letters of Israel are outside here on the Mediterranean Sea. And that is because we are a very, very tiny country, 800 kilometers by length and less than 100 by wide. And when we won our independence in 1948, we were surrounded by enemies. And they say that the need is the mothers of all inventions. And after all, when you are by yourself, a small, a lonely country, you cannot attend to your neighbor because he will bite you, then you need to develop everything by yourself. And that is why I'm here in front of you today, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if you know, but who is the leading cow in the world? Number one, Israel. The Israeli cow. The knowledge is sold to China. And it is sold to China because the average amount of milk a day for the Israeli cow is 45 liters per day. The African cow gives 8 liters instead of 45, what we are doing here in Israel today. I saw in Africa many times that on a trunk of a maize there are only 2 pieces. In Israel, there is not less than 6 on the same maize, the same tasty maize. So what I'm trying to say, that over the years we have developed many, many skills, techniques, and knowledge relating to this area that we are existing over there. 40% of our land is desert. We have no raw materials at all, not like yourself, no metals, no diamonds, no nothing. We didn't even have enough water to irrigate, and that's why we invented 2 main inventions. First of all, we are distilling our water. 85% of our sewage water is reused in the system. 85%, ladies and gentlemen. Which means from the very beginning, we use almost twice the same drop of water that came from the sky. We have a parallel system, parallel to the freshwater system. It's painted in purple, and over there is the distilled water used again for irrigation. The second thing that we did, we have invented the dripping device. The dripping device is dripping drop by drop of water only and straight to the roots of the plant. not to the ground, not to be evaporated, not to be streamed away, just drop after drop to the roots of the plant. And nowadays you can calculate exactly how many drops of water this plant at the age of, let's say, 3 months, how much water it needs a day, and you can give it to him exactly. No more and not less, without spending even 1 drop of water. Therefore, during this 70 years of independence, we have gained a lot of techniques, knowledge, and skills that we want to share, especially with you here in Africa, because the knowledge is there. The techniques are there. Everything is there. All you need to do is to implement it. And that is what we are doing in Galilee Institute. Galilee Institute is a private-owned organization which specializes in short-term courses to managers from all levels in a big variety of topics, including all variety of agriculture, including all variety of national security. And here I comes for my planned lecture. Okay. I was asked to speak rapidly because I have only 15 minutes. Therefore, I'm going to do it quite dense. Please, milady. Okay. Enter. Enter. Another one. Another one? Another one? Okay, hold on. Excuse me for that. Okay, let's go to bottom line. Bottom line of, please. Once more. Bottom line. After speaking a lot about climate change, let's sum it up. Let's sum it up. The old, clear, well-known global natural order, or phase, or balance, if you like to call it that, is changing rapidly, confronting human societies all over the world with large scale of non-familiar events that challenges regimes on their aim to ensure their people's better quality of life. I think that nobody here will argue with me that actually this is what we are speaking about. Let's forget for a moment that we are the cause of climate change. Let's hit the bottom line. How do we face this phenomena, and what do we do with it? Please, milady, please. One more, please. We have talked already about that, and I want to jump it up. Yeah, please, 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 please. Okay, once again, okay. What's in the near, okay, hold on. Let's speak about the near future. According to National Geographic experts, first of all, change will continue through this century and beyond. Please. Temperatures will continue to rise. Frost season and growing seasons will be lengthened. Changes in precipitation patterns. More droughts and heat waves. Storms will become stronger and more intense. Sea level will rise up to 4 feet by 2100. Arctic likely to become ice-free. Diverse change in microclimates area around the globe will likely continue to appear. Please. So how does all these phenomena are contributing to food security? Irregularity in natural biocycles and processes like temperature, wind, humidity, pattern of precipitation, water shortages, etc., are major obstacles in implementing agriculture plans and activities. Therefore, the main issue to be jeopardized by climate change is food security, not to mention the natural growth that you have here in Africa. And let's take a look about some of the phenomena. This slide will show you the expected changes on agriculture productivity in 2080 due to climate change. The strong brown is symbolizing 50% less in food productivity, and here it's around 15%, which means in Uganda and around the Lake of Victoria, it's going to be less, and in the average of 20% less productivity due to climate change. That is before we even mentioned the natural growth of the countries here. And we are going to see in a minute, we are going to see another slide relating to Lake Victoria. Please. Climate change impact on economic growth. Impacts of climate change in 2030 could be up to 2.7 of the GDP in Africa. This source is by the UNEP, yeah? And you can see here, Africa's population rising fastest. 230 million in 1950, 1.2 billion in 2015, 2.4 billion in 2050, 2100, 4.2 billion people. Look at this slide, ladies and gentlemen. 5 of the biggest countries of the world are in Africa. Uganda, Ethiopia, DRC, Tanzania, Nigeria. That means that Africa is going to be influenced a lot by the climate change, even though climate change is not just for Africa. We have the same phenomena, and I will mention them soon. Please. So what kind of human reaction? You're running too fast. What kind of human reaction can we anticipate in the future? And when I'm saying human behavior, I'm speaking in general about human people, because I think we can agree by now that people are people all over the world, and climate change meeting us all at the same place. So first of all, individuals and societies will strive to maintain their basic living. We are seeing this all over the world. People are striving to maintain some places only the basics, some places people are striving to just hold on to their quality of life. But all of us are facing the climate change influences. People will migrate as far as they can to improve their life. And I'm speaking about my small country of Israel. More than 20 years now, we are facing people who are coming by foot from Africa, crossing Sudan, crossing Egypt, crossing Sinai Peninsula, arriving to our southern border. Now you need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that because of the fact that Israel is so small, every 10,000 people that gets in are becoming a problem to us, because we are not in a situation that we have about 200 million people, then we'll have another 200,000. No, the whole amount of people which are living in Israel is 8.5 million people. Among them are 2 million of Palestinians, and among them about 1 million of Arabs, and the rest are Jews. So what we are to expect is also violent disputes on basic means of living that will emerge everywhere. And I think here and there in Africa we are already facing that. And I can say that lucky for us, the word lucky is a bit strange in that we have enough reasons to fight on besides basics of life. Therefore, fighting in the Middle East is continuing almost all the time. No, not related to anything that comes from climate change. Gaps between rich and poor in the same society will grow bigger. We feel it in Israel. I'm sure you feel it here in Uganda. I'm certain there is not even one society in the world which is not facing the same problem. People that have more are spending more on keeping their quality of life, and people that have less need to give up on things that used to have before, but they cannot afford to themselves now because of the change. Now let's look at that slide. That slide, if we'll go back again, please. That slide, back please, back. Excuse me for a minute. Okay. Take a look at this slide. It continues to develop from 1970 to 1980 to until 1951, okay? Until, 2015. You see the amount of people which are living near the Victoria Lake, the most populated area in East Africa, is the highest in Africa because of the fact that people are afraid of lacking water, and therefore people are coming more and more to live near the banks of Lake Victoria. So, what can we do? What can we do? First of all, new state-of-the-art knowledge, techniques, and skills must be distributed in large scale to all levels of society and in each state and country. And I'm telling you, as one small Israeli from one small country in the Middle East, we have all the knowledge. We have proved that it's working. You can come to our desert and you will see that our desert is flourishing, not just because of all the new method that we deployed over there, but we have adopted new plants. Plants that, for example, can drink mid-salty water. Mid-salty water are not the water from the sea, and they are not the fresh water that we are pumped from the inside underground. It's mid-salty, this kind of water that we have in the desert. And by now we grow in them fish, we irrigate with them olives, and much more. So actually, Israel is supposed to be one of the fountains of knowledge, of agriculture knowledge. And this comes to the duty of what the army did in Israel and what can be done, simply copy and paste, and to be done here. When we entered our homeland after being away for many years, in 1945 and to begin with, we needed to conquer the land again. Not conquer the land from people, but to conquer the land. The land was an arid land. There were swamps all over the place. So we needed, on one side, there were swamps, the other side was desert, and we needed to build new villages. We needed to build new settlements. And we did that with the army. We formated a brigade, which was called, if I will translate it in English, it will be the pioneering combating youth. Pioneering combating youth. Boys and girls that were supposed to go to the army under the law. Until today, people are supposed to go to the army, the boys to 3 years, girls to 2 years. But they can volunteer to this special unit. And this special unit, they made you, first of all, to be a soldier. Then they train you to be a farmer. So half of the day you were farming, half of the day you were preserving the borders or making other activity as a soldier. Not just that. In the 1950s, many Jews came from the diaspora. They needed places to stay in. We didn't have houses, then we built them tents. Who built the tents? The army. They used to go to school in order to learn our language, the mother tongue of us all, Hebrew, the holy language of the Bible. Who taught them? Lady soldiers taught them. And until today, we have in the army, we have women soldiers that after special training as a soldier, they become to be lady soldiers, and they are going to lady teachers, and they are going to places where we need much more emphasis on education. So in these emergency plans that should be prepared, exercised, and ready to be implemented to prevent humanitarian crisis, yes, the Ugandan army can be a part of it like we did. Not just that. Since we developed a very efficient mechanism to distribute agricultural knowledge, the first achievements of this agricultural knowledge distributed to those new villages where the soldiers were working. So immediately the other farmers could have seen that it's not just theories, it's exactly working. And through this mechanism of distribution, the knowledge with those soldiers who were part-time soldiers and part-time farmers, we built our country. Many of the villages that are existing today in Israel won their foundations because of that method. So if, for example, here you need to adopt new methods and new systems in order to show I would say the crowd of farmers, how should it be done? Yes, it can be done by the army like we have done before. Before finishing, of course, collaboration among states, societies, authorities, and organizations should be established to gain all the adventures that were already developed. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the wheel was already invented. There is no need to invent it now. There is no hunger in Israel. Not just because of the fact that Israel is a small country. There is no hunger in Israel because of the fact we are able to produce all our consumption in food in the small lands that we are having. Now, one more thing that I wanted to show you is related to the climate change. As you can see, here is Israel. As I said, people from the south, people from Africa, from Darfur, Sudan, and other places began walking to this country because the word was that land of milk and honey, right? Land of milk and honey, let's go to the milk and honey. So we were faced about 100,000 people that infiltrated into our country because of the fact that the border was open. So we needed to adjust ourselves to the situation, please. And we made, in the last few recent years, we built our borders, the southern border, again. You see, there are all fences. All over the place there are fences, and there is a road near the fences that you can immediately pursue anyone that will infiltrate into our country. Because unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to have thousands of refugees coming to our land. We don't have enough resources. So here you can see how this border can be preserved with all the new techniques that we are having right now, unmanned flying planes and balloons and observation posts and all kind of computers and so on. And at the end, we have this special battalion that I want to. Please don't laugh. Please don't laugh, because you are going to be amazed with the film that you are going, the short film that you are going to see now. Please. No. Well, I'm sorry. This short film would have shown you a blended gender of soldiers, lady soldiers and men soldiers, who are in a special battalion, in the battalion that is preserving the southern border of Israel. This is a very special experience to us, because of the fact that actually it's not a full battle battalion. It's just preserving the border, but still they are facing ISIS attempts to enter Israel, smugglers attempts to infiltrate into Israel, and of course those refugees that can no longer enter Israel because of the barrier that we have put over there. Last thing that I wanted to show to you will be related to another movie. This one, yeah. In 2015, we had a huge fire on. Reduce the voice, please. We had a huge fire on the biggest natural reserve in Israel, on Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, like many other places, is mentioned in the Bible, and this is the huge natural reserve in Israel, a mountain reserve. It caught fire, and it went for fire for several days. We needed to call help and assistance from all over the world. planes that can assist in forest fires came from Greek, from Cyprus, from other places, just to help us overcome this fire. As you can see, now this place is actually demolished. So here is the brigadier, the head of the brigade of the same force that I mentioned before, the pioneering, battling soldiers. They are, even today, they are still very, very professional in battling, but they came like an operational unit. All the brigade came to the natural reserve. You will immediately see them taking saws and all kind of other tools, and they were separated in the natural reserve, helping it to renew itself again. So this is another demonstration how the army can contribute to those challenges and difficulties of the climate change that we are still all going to face. And now we see the brief to the soldiers. All of them, you see the soldiers with on the shoulder they have the M16, and still they are going to have gloves and saws and all kind of other tools, and they are going to work among the what we used to be forest, in order to cut all the need to be cut and to collect all the stuff that need to be cut. Just a demonstration. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the difficulties in the video. Thanks a lot.
Give him another round of applause. Brigadier General Alon Navot from Galilee Institute. If I may remember my Hebrew, Todaraba. Thank you very much. Okay, and he's talking about the problem that people face and they decide to make right. And it's very true, because I've heard you are suffering with about 40,100 African immigrants alone. But I have news for you. We have 1 million here in Uganda. Yes, we're a big country, but 1 million. You can imagine. And it's real, and they'll have to come. Some of them will be economic migrants. Others will be because of security and other reasons. The other day, I had a nation in Europe. They are crying because they had 1,000 people showed up on their border. But Brigadier General will have over 1 million within our borders. Can you imagine? I understand now you have a certain technique of trying to, that we share with them with Rwanda and Uganda. I don't know how true it is. I don't want to go there. But as a country that for thousands of years you also scattered around the world, let me ask for your mercy that also maybe you can have them. Because you know this business of moving around much better than any other race in the world, don't you? Okay. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are supposed to have a media break, but allow me, we jump this and quickly go to the next presentation. Policy responses to climate change, mitigation and adaptation. From Paul Mafabi, Director of Environmental Affairs, Ministry of Water and Environment. Mr. Paul Mafabi, sir.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And protocol observed. The Honorable Minister said that if man does not put an end to environmental degradation will put an end to man. But also we've noted from all these speeches that Uganda is very vulnerable. It's no wonder with a little drought, the country is brought to its knees. And why are we vulnerable? First of all, because agriculture is the backbone of the economy. 80% of our people are dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods. But it is rain-fed, meaning that we depend on good weather and good rain to survive. So you can see the nexus, the link that we have between our agriculture and the good weather. But also to note that 40% of our rainfall is actually contributed by wetlands, forests, and some of it, of course, from the open waters. Globally, agriculture uses over 70% of provided water. That is through irrigation. Now, this is the story in Uganda. We are only using about 2% for irrigation. This means, and this is where the vulnerability comes in, if we're only using 2% for irrigation, it means that we are heavily dependent on rainfall, which rainfall is becoming very scarce, is becoming very unpredictable. And so our efforts to achieve food security are clearly being challenged by climate change, which is real, and in Uganda, it is exhibited by the less predictable seasonal rains, increased occurrence of extreme weather events, both droughts and floods. And this, of course, affects our food production, but there's something else that actually this affects, which is never captured in our discussions. If you've noticed that every time we have got a drought, inflation actually goes up. And if inflation goes up, it means that our macroeconomic stability is going to be affected, because inflation means that we are not moving in the right direction. So you can see a simple thing: little rainfall, little agriculture, inflation, and our macroeconomic system is affected. But what is causing all this? Have you asked yourself, why are we having this climate change having all these impacts in Uganda? And I think from the presentations, it was clear that it is a human influence. And in fact, we are very encouraged by the Chief of Defence Forces. Your statement, sir, is very encouraging for us, because it is clear that you are here to support us, and I believe that this should be the way to go. So let me just give you a few facts. One of the facts is that we are losing wetlands and forests at an alarming rate. Our forest cover has reduced from what used to be 24% of the surface area to now less than 10%. Our wetlands have not been spared either. They have reduced from what used to be 13% of the surface area to now between 8 and 9%. And these two natural resources, you don't need rocket science to see. You just need to drive, and I think the Chief of Defence Forces said Rubigi is a good example. Rubigi has been an intact wetland. As we speak today, it is almost becoming a relic. But also to note that our freshwater resources have declined by 34% in 16 years. From 67 billion cubic meters in 1995 to 43 billion cubic meters in 2011. But also the other fact is that without irrigated agriculture, the impact of climate change will cost Uganda in the order of $100 to $200 billion over the next 40 years. Now we're talking about billions, not of shillings, but billions of dollars. And so, what is our response? Of course, you know that government is not sitting and watching this situation go unattended to. The Chief of Defence Forces has already outlined a number of programs, to which I would like to add a few more before I conclude. One is that the country has developed now a climate change policy and a costed implementation plan. So we have now defined our problem, and Cabinet has approved the policy which is guiding us in the way forward. But also we now have a draft climate change bill that is soon going to be presented to Cabinet and eventually to Parliament, that will be debated and that should be able to provide the legal framework for implementing the policy. But we have also developed national adaptation plans of action, and we are now updating them sector by sector. In fact, the sector of agriculture is almost complete, and we are moving to address other sectors as well. Uganda has submitted its nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, and again, this NDC looks at our climate change efforts sector by sector: agriculture, forestry, energy, transport, among others. Of course, the country has ratified the Paris Agreement, and we believe that this is a strong commitment. We are also, and before Parliament now, there's a new environment bill. This new environment bill has got a number of issues to address, particularly climate change issues, but I wanted to point out three. One of them is that it is proposing to set up an environmental tribunal. Environmental tribunal to address environmental issues so that they can be handled in a much more express way. But also it is proposing express penalties. So if you are found degrading and the environmental force finds you degrading, then once Parliament approves, it will become that you can be issued with an express penalty, just like the traffic police do. But also the bill is proposing a specific environment protection force. At the moment, we're operating with the Environment Police Protection Unit. We are proposing that a special force, Environment Protection Force, be set up. And we believe that this will provide sufficient legal basis for us to protect the environment. In addition, of course, to the penalties which have been increased. So, in concluding, it's clear that climate change is a national threat and should be treated in the same way that we treat all other national threats. That is the only way we are going to address this issue. If you look at what's happening in the wetlands, what's happening in the forests, if you look at the bush burning that goes on, the other day we were in Arua, but as you drive through that region, you think that the entire heaven has been opened up with fire. So maybe, Chief of Defence Forces, we need to address this issue of bush burning, because it is one of those that actually are causing a lot of emissions, not only into the atmosphere, but on Lake Victoria. Because a lot of these minerals are deposited on Lake Victoria and actually increases the nutrient levels in the lake, which is causing many more problems for fish and other organisms. So we need to address the problem of bush burning. And finally, we need to take care of the environmental services that are provided by these ecosystems, whether they are wetlands, rangelands, mountains, and forests, among others. And that the more we delay to address the issue of environmental degradation, the more the food security crisis will increase. And of course, it has been clearly said that perhaps the next war is going to come out of the issues of the environment. It is therefore imperative that we need to mainstream environment and climate change issues across all government business. We are very, very happy that UPDF has already taken up and is mainstreaming environmental issues in your programs. We believe this is the way to go. And we also ask that other units of government should take up this matter. And that's the only way we can achieve long-term sustainability. So thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. I hope I've shed some lights. The figures are not so good, but the solution is with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Give him another round of applause. Mr. Paul Mafabi, Director of Environment Affairs, Ministry of Water and Environment. We are going to have a presentation by Mr. Manuel Keith Kisami, Research Fellow at ACODE, and also Ramadan Gobi, Makerere University Business School. And I'll give all of them only 10 minutes, 5 minutes each because of time, so that after that, we can have a plenary discussion. We get to hear from you. Because sometimes we can come and stand here and we make sense, yes. But perhaps we are not, well, perhaps we are making sense to ourselves only, or they are making sense to themselves. So it is important to hear from you. So there's going to be that time after the presentation when you participate, you add value, suggest solutions on how we can fight climate change and how we can have food security and keep our country stable. But maybe a few ground rules that we shall speak one at a time. You raise your hand, I'll be able to see where you are seated, and then I'll point to you, either by pointing out what you're wearing, if it is red or blue or yellow, or the row where you are seated. And please, just a minute is enough for you to express yourself or ask a question so that we can have many people contribute. Should you not be happy with some of the presentations, I implore you, please disagree with respect. Especially when you disagree, that's when we need to show more respect. Because in a symposium and debate like these, the views and ideas may not be the same, and you may not agree, and that's how human beings are. But what is going to set us apart is when we disagree with respect. But most importantly, to add value to the Ugandan story on how we can make our country better. Somebody said that there's going to be a crisis over resources. Probably yes. I'm told when you go to Jinja, Mr. Director, sir, where the River Nile is, about 20 kilometers down south, if you follow the River Nile, nowadays they call it Muzungu land. I don't know what that means, but I think it means our brothers and sisters from the northern hemisphere have come and settled there, or they have bought land, which is okay, because I'm sure there was a willing buyer and a willing seller. If you come to areas of Toro, almost every crater lake, somebody else has taken it who was not originally from there, which is also a good thing, I suppose, because there was a willing seller and a willing buyer. But do you know what? Maybe in future that can cause some trouble. So you have to think about them. And we could start having a friction along those issues. And the plenary that will come after the presentation by these two gentlemen, I will co-chair it, if you allow me, with Brigadier Henry Masiko, Chief Political Commissar of the UPDF. Or probably he'll just carry along so that he does, because I'm told he's got a wealth of experience in this and he can do it better. So he will chair, I will just be his 2IC, his second in command for this particular part. So may I ask Mr. Keith Kisami and Ramadan Gobi to take over.
Thank you, Patrick. In the interest of time, all protocol is observed, and I'll just go straight to the presentation. This discussion is meant to be over two concepts, three to be precise. That's one is climate change, food security, and national stability. And as you will agree with me, it has so far been skewed in favor of climate change. So I want to shift back the dynamic to food security, because that's where the study we did lies. This study is particularly on public expenditure governance in agriculture extension in Uganda. Why have we looked at agriculture extension? Is because agriculture is largely a private undertaking. So government only plays a supportive or an enabling role. And that role is epitomized by extension services. So that is why we have looked at extension services and looked at the governance of expenditure in the extension services. We won't go through the importance of agriculture because it has already been stated. What I will emphasize by way of introduction is the fact that the sector has been having poor outcomes
despite the increased investment and numerous reforms that we have experienced over the past 5 to 7 years. And so when we looked at that and reconciled it with, because if you, at the start of this financial year, the agriculture sector had experienced 4 consecutive quarters of negative growth. It has only picked up with positive growth in the last 2 sectors of this financial year. So we were asking ourselves, where is the gap? What is the problem? And we looked, when you look at literature, research has showed that unless there are effective governance systems in place, interventions in agriculture will remain ineffective in their impact on achieving food security and poverty reduction. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the background against which this study is predicated. The report is available for you to review, so I will spare you the details of the methodological approach that we took because we don't have a lot of time. But in a nutshell, we used an indicator-based assessment that looks at 9 principles of governance. And those are strategic vision, participation, coordination, transparency, control of corruption, accountability, effectiveness and efficiency, responsiveness, and finally, equity. Public expenditure governance, in this framework, we've defined it to be the manner in which decisions over public expenditure are made and implemented, including the interaction among actors. And we want to thank everyone in the public service and the private entities that we interacted with during the course of this study for the input that you gave into this. The leadership of OWC being one of those. We had a very informative chat with General Saleh on some of the challenges that are in the extension service in this country. And those views have been reflected by way of bringing you some of the voices that you will see in the report. I'll rush very quickly and talk about the study is done in those districts, and we chose them on the basis of a number of factors, one being the priority crops that are grown in these districts. Our NDP2 has a list of 8 priority crops, and so we're placing emphasis on those. And we also we sought to have a good representation of the agroecological zones that are across the country, or what we call production zones. So, as I've already told you, the money going into the sector has increased. It has more than doubled over the last 5 years. So the talk of limited funding to agriculture has been, in a way, dealt with. Yes, admittedly, the sector still takes a small proportion of that budget, between 3 to 5%, but that small proportion in 2017-18 was was almost $1 trillion shillings. Most of this funding has been going towards extension, which is why we have looked at how it is being governed, how the priorities are being set, how the funding is being allocated, for us to be able to understand if we are spending effectively and efficiently. The next slide shows you the distribution of the funding, and as you can see, the longest columns over the 2 years, financial year 2015-16 and 16-17, are those of extension services. So, I'll go quickly to the study findings and talk about the fact that the recent reforms that we've seen in the sector, one of those being the OWC intervention, have already yielded some gains. We have seen limitations in the duplication of roles that was previously there between the NAD structure and the district production office structure. We've seen an improvement to a small extent in the distribution of inputs. Yes, there are still challenges, but there's been some improvement therein. When we look at strategic vision, and when we talk about strategic vision, we are looking for consistency from top to down. And the desired outcome there is that we have a consistency of district agriculture extension plans with both the national agriculture extension plans and the extension needs of the farmers. What we noticed, however, was that while there was a consistency between the plans at both levels, the needs of the farmers are not reflected in the plans. And this was mostly reflected in the priority crops that were distributed. You had instances of farmers getting crops that they do not know how to farm. They've never dealt with them before. And with the limitations in extension services available, currently our ratio of extension worker to farmers is about 1 to 8,000. And that in itself limits even the small chance that there can be someone learning how to deal with a new crop variety. But more importantly, these places, as we've mentioned earlier, Uganda is distributed into or subdivided into production zones, or what they call agroecological zones. These are zones that have the different soils and the different crops that can thrive in those soils. We noticed that we were having problems where people are getting crops that do not thrive in the soils that they have, or crops that they have never dealt with before. There is a quote from one of the farmers that we spoke to on the previous slide, who was saying recently they delivered ginger at the sub-county, and the extension worker refused them after finding out that no one in Kichusa has ever grown them. No one had requested for them. So there are gaps there that need to be dealt with in terms of the level of prioritization. In terms of participation, the major finding there is that there is limited participation with the absence of the farmer fora. Without farmer fora, there is no more structure for the farmers to be involved in the decision making and resource allocation of the sector. Coordination challenges still exist between the numerous actors that are there. I'll skip these because I've been told my time is up. So I'll skip to effectiveness and efficiency, where we had most of the issues. We discovered that the production and marketing grant, which is the funding that is available, is so limited it's limited to mostly wages. There's only a very small non-wage element that facilitates extension workers to reach out or to do their job. The other thing is there's a very limited amount of funding going into quality assurance. So that's how you have fake inputs and fake pesticides on the markets, because the departments that are meant to ensure the quality of these inputs don't have the facilitation to do so. When they bring the seeds or the inputs at the district level, all the DPOs can do is comment on the physical aspects of the seedlings, whether they are withered or not. It's after they've grown that they are able to know whether the inputs they got were what was required. I'm going to pause here and ask some indulgence from Kamara to allow Ramadan to come and summarize the conclusions from the study and the recommendations.
Thank you. All protocols observed, the journals in the room. My name is Ramadan Govi. I was part of the team that carried out this study. And before I give the recommendations, which are quite critical, I wanted to comment briefly on the political economy of agriculture extension in the country. Because when I see General Saleh, and as soon as he arrived in OWC in 2013-14, his main concern was on coordination within the sector. And our study looked at this. We measured the coordination by looking at the best practices, meetings, for example, of technical planning committees at the local government level, meetings between the district commercial officers, production officers, as well as the OWC officer at the district level, and the COW and other leaders there. A meeting discussing agriculture, as well as annual joint review meetings on agriculture extension. And the findings are quite damning because, for example, those three indicators I've mentioned, we found that only 20% of the districts had evidence of technical people meeting to discuss agriculture. Only 30% of them had evidence on the best practice of annual review meeting. And the rest of the districts, about 50%, had no evidence whatsoever of coordinating their activities. That is within the district and also between the district and the Ministry of Agriculture. Actually, we found that despite the appreciation at policy level that there is a need to coordinate implementation of extension services in agriculture, the implementers told us that they don't appreciate it at all, or they simply state it without evidence of practicing it. And I think these are very important policy issues which need to be answered. We found, for example, that Maif had completely been left out in the planning of agriculture at local government level. And even within the new structure of extension service, Maif is not directly communicating with the lower levels. It is detached and only communicating with the finance, maybe for purposes of the funding. Now, the recommendation is, which come out of this study, one, we call for distribution of agricultural inputs in line with agroecological zones. How can this be done? We suggest decentralization of procurement of agricultural inputs instead of keeping it at the center. And also consider adopting a voucher system for distribution of inputs on the quality assurance, especially for seeds and chemicals. We are saying that let us decentralize also quality assurance by the district agriculture officers, such that we can be able to deal with this challenge, because at national level we shall never be able to manage the quality issues. And also we call upon government to fast track the national seed policy, because in there are a lot of things which can help in addressing these issues. And also the need for local governments to improve on coordination and communication amongst their technical people. You find a team of technical people at a district who have never met in a year, and they have been doing extension of agriculture. So you wonder how they are doing that. I think for the interest of time, I'll stop there, but there are a lot of issues in the study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Give him another round of applause.
By the way, this symposium is being telecast live across Uganda. So it's not just on us in the hall who are watching. Many people are watching us on NBS TV and following us even across the region on different platforms. So Uganda is watching and Uganda is listening to you. And I think for that matter, I suggest that I amend the program. I know when you talk about amending, your hearts can go to something else. I amend the program and we invite, I call up new Dr. Arthur Mujisha to invite the Presidential Advisor on Defense and Security to speak to us and launch, because that is a very important segment. Then we can go into the plenary discussion after that. Dr. Mujisha.
Thank you very much. Without wasting our time, I want to invite General Salim Sarakandwanaho, the Senior Presidential Advisor on Defense and Security, to address us. He is also the National Coordinator of Operation Wealth Creation. Please receive him.
Okay.
I will start with the good news, not the bad news. The bad news we have all of us have heard. The good news is that, as per that slide, Uganda is a maize surplus country. We have more maize than we can consume, in spite of all the problems that have been talked about. So that is our, a bit back, go back. That one is for February, June estimated maize from TGCU, one of the very strong bodies that we have, which are focusing on commodity value chain. Next. Estimated annual maize production is 4 million. Current estimated crop for December, February is 2 million. Uganda has a surplus sale to the region every year. We exported grain to our neighbors even during severe drought and the fall armyworm attack on 2016-17. Over 80% of Uganda's grain is traded informally, which is a disadvantage to Uganda, to countries in the East African region in its raw form. Dirty, with high moisture. Next. To date, the private sector has massively invested in grain processing, that is cleaning, drying, grading, silo storage and warehouses. Over 150 million have been invested in the last 4 years. Noted also a positive achievement led by government, like the National Grain Trade Policy is in place, though not operationalized yet. The East African Community Grain Standards were harmonized and are in place, but not enforced. The warehouse receipt system is now in place, but not yet functional. The government and the private sector are in advanced stages of having the Uganda National Commodity Exchange operationalized. In spite of the above, Uganda still allows export of raw grain to all types, in complete disregard of the standards. And 80% of this trade is informal. Due to lack of enforcement of standards and open border policy, Kenya, Rwandese and Sudanese informal traders roam the villages from border to border in search of low-priced and processed grain. As a result, Kenya, a country always in deficit, actually formally exports more grain than Uganda. Unless addressed, Uganda will remain a source of cheap, poor quality grain to the region, and the investors stroke processors will continue to lose out on their investment in spite of their contribution to the national coffers and employing thousands of people directly and indirectly. So those are the roots. Those are the roots of no, it's eyesight, it's not the right. It's my eyesight which is disturbing. Yeah. So sorghum lake, month of November, you can see sorghum 600 and something tons, maize 3,992, beans 9,990, millet 2,000, all went to Kenya, but in raw form. So it was not, we as Uganda are not benefiting from this sweat of ours with actual trade. Next. Regional grain flows. Regional grain flow maps shows that a total of 20,000 metric tons of assorted raw and processed grain leaving Uganda to different countries in the region in 1 week. That was a week ending 12th of November 2017, including maize, beans, nuts, sorghum, peas, and millet. Unprocessed maize fetches between $80 and $120 less per ton than if it were exported processed. So an opportunity to sell 600,000 tons to 1 million tons of grain to Kenya annually, starting with the current crop, is being negotiated. Here, the Grain Council of Uganda appreciates the effort of His Excellency the President in initiating this. Estimated value of this single deal would be at least $195 to $325 million annually, with the potential to grow higher. In order for this business to materialize, we need to ensure a competitive price, good quality, and to put in place the necessary logistics, and this calls for both private and public sector to play their roles properly. Next. So our requirement, number one, that means this shows that we are, as far as maize is concerned, we are food secure. That one requires a clap. Don't look at the... Because you were talking about food security and environment and whatever. So as far as maize is concerned and beans, we are food secure. The only challenge that we have is that we are not earning from the surplus that we would be selling to the market. So what we require now as maize producers is enforcement of the East African standards. And then number two, availability and accessibility of a competitively priced grain export credit fund. And we propose a well-priced revolving amount of about $10 million, which will enable us to earn $325 million. The third is the mobilization and stimulation of the railway and water transport network in the medium to long term. And then number four is grain processing, storage, infrastructure, and expertise on the private sector. So potential export revenue of up to 325 million from one crop and from one country. Improved livelihoods of grain farming and trading population in producing areas. Positive knock-on effects in related activities like seed and other inputs for production, transport, and logistics. Over 2,000 metric tons of grain can be shipped out every day. So some of the processing facilities of the TGCU are there. That is in Nwoya. Next. That is in Mubende. Next. That is in Mtiana. Agroways in Jinja. Omer Farming Company in Amuru. That is Kapeka in Nakaseke. And by the way, that is mine. Go back. That one is mine there. You see how good it looks. But this was 6 months ago. Go ahead. That is Kampala. That is in Mukono. That is in Rwengo. That is Kiriandongo. And many more. So in spite of all the difficulties that we have, we still have capacity to produce, because worldwide I think people are using 128 kgs of fertilizers per hectare. But in Uganda we are using less than 1.5 kilograms per hectare, but we still produce surpluses. So that's why when we are talking, we should bear that in mind. So that is, I request that we talk about markets, because market is a big challenge for us into the region. We are so liberal, we are so open-hearted, and I think the region is taking advantage of our farmers. Okay, then the next one, which will completely concur with what you have written in certain aspects, but not in all of them. That is the background that I wanted the minister to see this. For us at OWC, we are refocusing the OWC intervention to meet the commander's intent. We have been in this, deployed in the aid to civil power for almost 5 years now. It started in July. Several challenges and gaps have been identified and continue to exist despite the numerous stakeholders' efforts to have them mitigated. Next, push it up. Go a little bit down. Down. No, go up first. You are taking me far. No. Yeah, there. So all of them, you have talked about them. Delivery of low quality and quantity of inputs. Late delivery, mortality rates, all of them are known. Like the book has said already. I think they copied what I was thinking about and they put it in the research, but it's good that you have put it in the research because I concur with you. Go ahead. Air supply, beneficiaries own, connive with suppliers, and sign for technologies without receipt in exchange of money. All those are there. There are like 24 reasons why we believe that OWC should be refocused. So we recommend the implementation of regional logistics hub and e-voucher system like you have said. So logistic hubs are intended to serve as one-stop centers for all logistics supported by OWC. Certified seeds, pesticides, market linkages, extension services. All farmer groups will be required to pick the farm inputs from these hubs. So activity and services at regional hubs will include storage facilities, farm inputs, all those, they should be in that. So the e-voucher system is intended to distribute allocations to farmers to inform of tokens through an ICT-based online system. Farmers are expected to pick farm inputs equivalent to their tokens from the logistic hubs or approved suppliers who shall be based at the regional level. So, we are concurring with you, but unfortunately, researchers, I don't think the government will agree with us. Because this system will kill all our jobs will go. The jobs of the politicians, those who make recommendations, those ones who make signatures, then all those. Because one cow, you need 38 signatures in order to distribute one cow. So all those jobs will go. So I'm now backed by research, and you have published it, but I don't think it works. So we may not succeed in the 17, 18, but I believe 18, 19 may be. They will start seeing the light. So that's what we are suggesting as a hub. We are suggesting that one as a hub, and you can see it's there. It's all there. Farmers and then the markets. Because the problem is now becoming the markets and how to organize the farmer to have a voice, which you talked about in the research. Because the farmer's voice at planning is zero. At processing, it is very, very minimal. They have some little power at production because they have land and labor. They have some control there, but otherwise, in the rest of the functions of the value chain, their power is very, very low. We had also worked together with the researchers, including Ramadan, on who and where is the farmer in the power relations of the Ministry of Agriculture.